Contain your enthusiasm for the prospect of a Blagojevich pardon. It's not going to happen.
There's hope. He didn't say no, Dan.
Your obsession with corrupt Illinois governors just baffles me. But look, we've got more important things to talk about than Illinois governors in the can. We could talk about that for hours, but we have salient matters of geopolitical importance to talk about, and we should get to them post-haste. And to do that, to help us with that, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend, Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Good morning. Happy New Year to you. Let's start with some news yesterday, starting with the fact that former Indiana Senator, who also was a Foreign Service officer, ambassador to Germany, Dan Coates, has been named the Director of National Intelligence for the Trump administration. What's your assessment of that choice for that post?
Well, I think that's a great choice, and hope he has an easy confirmation and can get on the job. There's a lot that needs to be done. There have been stories about the Trump transition, looking into reorganizing the intelligence community, whether the Director of National Intelligence Organization, as it is now, it needs to be as big as it is, and a range of other things. And I just think after 8 years of neglect under Obama, there's undoubtedly a lot of work to do. Mike Pompeo has been nominated to head the CIA, and others already in place in the military in particular really have a critical function. So this is going to be very important. Obviously, we're in the midst of all this discussion about the Russian hacking question. So getting good people into those kinds of jobs, I think, is going to be important for credibility going forward.
And does Trump have a point with the notion that maybe DNI is more bureaucracy-laden than it should be? We talked to Mike Rogers, former House Intelligence Committee chairman, yesterday, and he suggested, look, DNI right now is 10 times bigger than it was originally conceived to be, the typical mission creep of government agencies. And so a fresh set of eyes on that agency is deserved, as is the case with so many agencies.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a good time now to review. It's probably, 13, 14 years after the creation of DNI to decide whether the idea has succeeded. The argument to create it was that with 16, 17 intelligence agencies, the director of the CIA could not also be, couldn't wear a second hat as Director of Central Intelligence, because it was said he'd be biased in favor of his own agency. So Congress did what the 9/11 Commission recommended, and it's unfortunately a frequent ploy in government. You need somebody to coordinate all these people, so you create another new office on top of it. And it becomes one of the people that then has to be coordinated with the others, and it develops its own conflicts of interest and so on. So whether going back to the pre-DNI model or modifying the DNI model or whatever they choose to do, I think this is a good time to review it. I think ultimately control of the intelligence community, directing it, making sure it's picking up the information we really need and coordinating adequately, has to be overseen by the National Security Council. That's what's set up to advise the president. I think the NSC and its staff need to do more than they have historically to rein the intelligence community in.
Well, Donald Trump has his intelligence briefing today with James Clapper, but he seems to be leery of U.S. intelligence believing more Julian Assange rather than the CIA or the DNI. Is this a slap in the face to those who work for U.S. intelligence?
Well, I think he's retweeted on the Assange question. I do think today's meeting is where the rubber meets the road, and it's entirely possible that he'll come out and say he thinks that Julian Assange is lower than a bottom-dwelling sea slug, which is about where I would put it.
Mm-hmm.
Any policymaker is entitled to question intelligence, to ask whether its conclusions are as well supported as some claim. It's entitled to say, I just don't think this is relevant to policy. Certainly entitled to say it doesn't dictate policy. And this back and forth between policymakers and intelligence officials is healthy and desirable. So nobody should be upset that the president-elect doesn't automatically accept without hesitation or question what's put in front of him. On the other hand, where if there is evidence, and we haven't seen it all yet, we may see it when some of it's declassified and put out, we're told, on Monday, he'll see everything. And if it's convincing, then to me, I've said repeatedly, I think this is very serious. If Russia tried to influence our election, whether they succeeded or not is as irrelevant as it would be if Japan had attacked us on Pearl Harbor, but all of its bombs and torpedoes had missed and no Americans had been killed or no ships sunk. That wouldn't say, oh, gee, great, no harm, no foul. I guess we're not concerned about it.
Speaking of the U.S. military, this interesting report that there right now are no American aircraft carriers deployed in the South China Sea or anywhere else in the world. This is the first time since World War II that at least one U.S. aircraft carrier has not been deployed, and that's always been seen as a symbol of American power the world over, and particularly in problematic areas like, for example, the South China Sea. Is that just kind of an outlier, an externality, or is that something that speaks to military readiness and something that should be a symbol of concern for American military might?
I think it's a huge problem. I don't think we have enough carrier battle groups. I don't think we have enough ships at sea generally. I think our equipment, our weapon systems across the board, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, are all aging rapidly and need to be replaced. We need to be thinking about moving ahead. And it's important that we project that strength because that's a critical element of the deterrence posture that dissuades our enemies from challenging us in the first place. I don't have any illusion that doing what Trump said in the campaign, which is to rebuild the American military after 8 years of savage budget cuts by Obama, I have no doubt it's going to be expensive. I have no doubt it means that some domestic programs are going to have to be cut, maybe all the way back to the catastrophically low levels of 2008 in the Bush presidency. Can you imagine the horror? But we need to do it because we need to spend a lot more on the military, and we need to get our budget under control and reduce the deficit. So my formula is military spending up, intelligence spending up, domestic spending down.
As former United States ambassador to the United Nations, we wanted, of course, to get your reaction to the UN resolution on Israel that happened a few weeks ago.
And the House Republicans yesterday voting up their own resolution condemning the Obama administration for taking a pass on the UN resolution.
Well, I think what Obama did was a reversal of 50 years of bipartisan American foreign policy on the Middle East, abandoning the land for peace formula that Israel used successfully in the Camp David peace accord with Egypt, abandoning the principle that outside parties can't impose their version of what a just and lasting peace in the Middle East is going to be. It's a lot more than a parting shot by Obama because I think it's going to have serious negative consequences for Israel and the United States. And we've only got 2 weeks to go, but until Obama's presidency is history. But in that 2 weeks, he can still do more damage. So I think it's important that the House pass this resolution. I think there's a lot more we need to do in light of the countries that voted in favor of the resolution just before Christmas and about the UN system. Lindsey Graham has proposed suspending all or a big part of our UN assessments until the resolution is corrected. Personally, I think we need to move away from assessed or mandatory contributions to the UN system anyway. It's like a tax on the United States that the General Assembly votes. I think all of our contributions should be voluntary, and we contribute to the agencies that do good work, and we don't contribute at all, or we contribute a lot less to the agencies that don't do good work. I know that's a radical principle at the UN, but it's a principle that all of our federal government budget decisions should be based on.
Well, and just with sticking on that point, the resolution that the House passed yesterday included about 100 House Democrats joining House Republicans to issue this rebuke to the Obama administration. And it comes after John Kerry made the speech essentially detailing the administration's posture on the two-state solution, its current status, and Israel's role in that, with John Kerry making the rather incredible statement that Israel has a choice. It can either exist as a Jewish state or a democratic state. It can't be both.
Yeah, well, this is in support of the theory that animated Kerry's speech and that animated Obama's policy for 8 years, including when Hillary Clinton was secretary, and that animated their abstention on that UN resolution allowing it to pass. They are determined to implement this so-called two-state solution. I think history has passed it by. I think it's deader than a doornail. I think you have to find other solutions. I've proposed what I call the three-state solution. You give Gaza to Egypt, divide the West Bank. Israel takes what it thinks it needs for security dictate, and you give the rest back to Jordanian sovereignty. I think that's best for the Palestinian people, to attach them to real economies, not to some make-believe economy called Palestine. Now, my suggestion's unpopular. I recognize that, but if you conclude, as I have, that the two-state solution is dead, we need an alternative. Kerry and Obama have refused to recognize that. I think they're fighting a losing battle.
Just on sticking on Israel for a minute here, there's some Republicans that have found renewed energy to promote the idea that the U.S. Embassy should be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in Israel. Is that a position you support?
Yes, absolutely. And I think Trump is going to do it. I think it's not only because he thinks it's the right thing to do. I think it will mark him as a different kind of politician. Plenty of other campaigning nominees for president have said we'll move the embassy to Jerusalem, and then they never do it. I think Trump's going to do it, and that's going to be one more piece of evidence that what he says he's going to do, he does.
All right, now, Dan Proft and I, we were both very upset when you weren't named Secretary of State. What's the possibility of you becoming Deputy Secretary?
Well, I think I'm probably not going into the administration at all. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot to do on the outside as well, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. All right. He is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks again. And again, Happy New Year.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.